Alicia didn't want to. They looked at me when I got home last night, like, you actually stayed at the church. You're an idiot.
I don't know, man. You were booking it because I followed you shortly after, and I just saw the red light, like a bullet.
I would have played it at the council meeting.
You're a Blake. I'll never complain again. I think ours was just over 600. I think so. But I would be thinking like just how easy it is when you're on like the second story or second floor. So just turning all the stuff up. So even that was just nice to just walk.
Yeah, I tried to keep work already, so.
But I mean, we're 20 minutes away from
No, you're not.
too.
You're gonna go
The
back
first
early.
6 years we just lived outside.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds like we need to be done, so. Yeah.
Oh, we saved you a few.
I hope you
Yeah.
like lay down to
Yeah.
get up.
Stretch out. No, that's
Yeah, we can get started.
Test,
All right.
test, test.
We good?
Yep. Test,
All right.
test. Yeah.
Thank you guys for coming. This is the second session that we're going to do, and then we are actually talking about doing one in May as well for Mental Health Awareness Month. So if you like what you hear, invite friends, bring as many people as you can, and we'll publicize that one a little bit more, open it up to the public. Let's open with prayer. Lord, we know that mental health it's a tricky subject to talk about, but we also know that you are in control. Let this presentation be a blessing to those who hear it and a useful tool, and help us remember that this is not our home and that our true home is with you in heaven. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So, as far as I know, this hasn't been done in a church. I talked to some therapists, the Christian Family Solution therapist in the Valley, and she said that she hadn't heard of a presentation like this done at church. So I wanted to utilize the counselors that we had in our congregation and get information out to our congregation and eventually also our circuit. This is pretty important to me because my sophomore year of college, I was diagnosed with severe depression. So this is an important thing to know. A lot of people are probably struggling with mental health that you don't even know about. So that's why I wanted to get this information out and let it be a useful tool for our congregation. So I'll let our counselors introduce themselves.
I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
It says Jenny's name first. All right, my name's Jason Buck, and I started doing counseling when I was 17 years old, when a friend of mine committed suicide in high school. And from there on in college, I did start doing counseling work for social anxiety. So I've done a lot of cognitive therapy for social anxiety throughout my lifetime. And what I liked about cognitive therapy, which you might consider more of a worldly therapy, if that is one way to look at that. However, I would always look at my cognitive therapy handouts and I would write the scriptures that made sense on those statements. So if it was a statement where it would make sense for me to write, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, I would put that on my cognitive therapy so that it would be enhanced with scripture. And so my school background is, if you wanted to take a look here.
I don't think we have it.
Oh, we haven't got there. Yeah, so my school background there, pastor wanted to make sure that you had reputable people doing the presentation. So my diploma is there, and you can see it was from Bruce Lee University, and it does say that I'm a doctor and a counselor and a dunker because of my basketball. So, but I got my master's at Ottawa University in 2008, and my doctorate at ASU in 2012 in behavioral health.
And then I'm Jenny Spouty. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I got my bachelor's degree in family and human development with a minor in sociology at ASU. And then I got my master's in social work at ASU as well. Graduated in 2017 with that. Worked towards my independent licensure, which is why I'm now an LCSW. I currently work at an agency that is basically primary care providers, and I'm a behavioral health consultant. So if somebody comes in with stress or depression, anxiety, trauma, grief, suicidal, whatever else, I'm called in to assist and talk with them. I also enjoy it because I get to work with children, so I get to go and see the little kiddos as well, help them with behavioral concerns. And then there's also our women's health department, so I love seeing the pregnancies, working with postpartum depression, those things.
Okay. We're on the intro message, right?
Okay, so Josh already explained why we're doing this presentation. There's a couple of bullet points there. Our hope for this presentation is we just want you all to feel confident in resources that you can give either for yourself or for loved ones, coworkers, friends, family, everything else. We interact with so many people on a daily basis, and a lot of people are struggling right now. And so we want you to feel confident in having those resources, being able to help others.
It's like putting on a corset for prom or something, man. Is that better right there? Test, test, test.
Negative.
Negative? You mind putting that on? Fine motor.
And Pastor's just handing out, those are resources. They're not to follow along with the presentation, but those are the resources that we would like for you guys to use or to give other people.
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay.
That goes with the.
All right. Okay, so sorry about that little hiccup. I'm on? Yeah, okay. So we've probably all had a nightmare. We thanked God when we woke up saying it was just a dream relief. We get back to our lives. So imagine someone with a serious mental illness, and though mental illness is a spectrum, their nightmare is often a living one. Treatment usually isn't as simple as go check out this program or just take this pill. Some of the best mental health outcomes include a person maintaining recovery with focused effort and a supportive community where they can engage in regular contact. But to help them get there, a hope needs to be instilled, that although their life may not be what they thought it should be, it can still be good. Also, as CPR can help someone having a heart attack, there are approaches to help someone experiencing mental stress or substance abuse. So how can we be more compassionate with ourselves and others as Jesus would if we were going through a mentally stressful time? And then that goes right into the mental health myths and facts. Oh, yeah, Josh.
As with everything we
Do in our lives, Scripture and God should be at the center. So we have a few Bible passages. Jesus said, "Hush and be still," and the wind died down, and it became perfectly calm, Mark 4:39. And that's just a wonderful reminder that God can calm the storms in our life when things seem kind of overwhelming. 1 Peter 5:7, "Cast your anxiety on him because he cares for you." And then, of course, we remember that Scripture promises that God will never leave us or forsake us. And that's something to keep in mind as we either help somebody or we struggle with it ourselves.
All right. Okay, so there is a handout on the mental health myths and facts. I'm not going to go through all of them, just a few. And there is a link on there if you're interested in going in there and checking out all of them. So mental health problems affect everyone. Myth, mental health problems don't affect me. Fact, mental health problems are actually very common. In 2020, about 1 in 5 American adults experienced a mental health issue. 1 in 6 young people experienced a major depressive episode. 1 in 20 Americans lived with a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression. Suicide is the leading cause of death in the United States. In fact, it was the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 24. It accounted for the loss of more than 45,979 American lives in 2020, nearly double the number of lives lost to homicide. Myth, children don't experience mental health problems. Fact, even very young children may show early warning signs of mental health concerns. These mental health problems are often clinically diagnosable and can be a product of the interaction of biological, psychological, and social factors. Half of all mental health disorders show first signs before a person turns 14 years old, and 3/4 of mental health disorders begin before age 24. Unfortunately, only half of children and adolescents with diagnosable mental health problems receive the treatment they need. Early mental health support can help a child before problems interfere with other developmental needs. Myth, people with mental health problems are violent and unpredictable. Fact, the vast majority of people with mental health problems are no more likely to be violent than anyone else. Most people with mental illness are not violent, and only 3 to 5% of violent acts can be attributed to individuals living with a serious mental illness. In fact, people with severe mental illness are over 10 times more likely to be victims of violent crime than the general population. You probably know someone with a mental health problem and don't even realize it, because many people with mental health problems are highly active and productive members of our communities. Myth, personality weakness or character flaws cause mental health problems. People with mental health problems can snap out of it if they try hard enough. Fact, mental health problems have nothing to do with being lazy or weak, and many people need help to get better. Many factors contribute to mental health problems, including biological factors such as genes, physical illness, injury, or brain chemistry, life experiences such as trauma or history of abuse, and family history of mental health problems. People with mental health problems can get better, and many recover completely. And this last one here, myth, I can't do anything for a person with a mental health problem. Fact, friends and loved ones can make a big difference. In 2020, only 20% of adults received any mental health treatment in the past year, which included 10% who received counseling or therapy from a professional. Friends and family can be important influences to help someone get the treatment and services they need by reaching out and letting them know you're available to help, helping them access mental health services, learning and sharing the facts about mental health, especially if you hear something that isn't true, treating them with respect just as you would anyone else, and refusing to define them by their diagnosis or using labels such as crazy. Instead, use first-person language.
So we want to go over some general signs and symptoms of mental health. This does not cover all of the signs and symptoms. We could go on and on and on about those, but we wanted to highlight some important ones. The first one there is lack of motivation, being numb or despondent. So lack of motivation, you'll start to see either yourself or someone, start to have the dishes pile up, bills are piling up, laundry's piling up. Those daily things that you normally are somewhat on top of just start to get behind on. Lack of motivation to just do those things, lack of interest in doing those things. With numbness, what we mean by that is you can be with a group of friends, everybody's laughing, enjoying themselves, and you feel nothing. You don't feel that joy, you don't feel that happiness, you can't explain why, but you just don't feel that. Or there can be other times where you don't feel hurt or sad in a given situation. Sleeping difficulties is a big one when it comes to mental health and stress. So it can be really hard to fall asleep. A lot of times racing thoughts can be there that can prevent us from being able to feel tired and go to sleep. Waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to go back to sleep. And then also oversleeping is a big one, especially with depression. Isolation or no desire to socialize. So you don't want to spend time with family or friends, go out, be around people. Low energy, so you just feel really tired. Even though you're getting 8 hours of sleep, you just feel, again, it ties in with the lack of motivation, but you just feel exhausted. Difficulties focusing and concentrating. So that's where you can be reading a book and you read the same line over and over again and you can't remember what you just read. Or you're at work, you're trying to do a simple task, you can't stay on task, you get distracted easily, or can't focus on that email. Hopelessness, worthlessness, and feeling not good enough. So with hopelessness and worthlessness, it can be hard for people who haven't fully felt this, but with depression especially, it's this feeling of just despair. This feeling in your gut of just there is no point in going on, this feeling that there is nothing good coming your way. And with not good enough, that's just that feeling of no matter what I do, I won't be good enough for my family, my friends, I'm not good enough for myself. Crying spells or anger outbursts. So a lot of times we have a lot of emotions when it comes to mental health. Crying is an outlet. It's a way of letting those emotions out, and so it's your brain's way of trying to get you to process and deal with those emotions. So when it builds up inside, we tend to cry. Same thing with anger. So small things that normally never set us off, we get really upset about. So an example I give a lot of times to my patients to help them understand is taking the trash out. You tell your husband or your child you need to take the trash out, they don't do it, you completely overreact. You yell at them, and as soon as you're done yelling, you just have this instant regret of why did I overreact like that? I can't believe I got so upset over just the trash. Over excessive worrying, so the what if thoughts. What if this horrible thing is going to happen? This feeling that something awful will happen, but not being able to pinpoint what that is. So not being able to change those thoughts is big, so it just constantly is going around in your head, which is very exhausting. Irritability and crankiness. So when we have depression, anxiety, trauma, whatever else, we are dealing with so much emotions, mental health, physical things that a lot of times we don't have energy for patience. So we tend to be very kind of cranky. So just little things, again, set us off, we get upset about. People will say that we're cranky. Appetite changes. So either you're not eating or under eating. People tend to lose a lot of weight during this. Or now eating becomes a pleasure circuit. So that's our coping skill and we overeat. Then substance use or abuse is a big one. So that's where we start to reach for alcohol a lot more, or marijuana is recreational now, so you start to use marijuana a lot more to numb yourself. A couple other things I did want to point out, becoming a workaholic. So that's where you're just putting a lot of hours and you're working constantly as a way to avoid your personal life. I don't want to go home because I feel lonely, or I don't want to deal with the things that are going on at home. And then physical health symptoms are a big one. Primary care is actually a place where a lot of people go with mental health symptoms, and they're complaining about stomach issues, dizziness, the low energy I mentioned before, a lot of those things. And so there's those physical health symptoms that are there for mental health.
And Jenny mentioned the workaholic, there's a book by Ann Lemke out there right now called Dopamine Nation, and she covers, not only can we get addicted to things like work. In my case, recently I got addicted to too much physical exercise. I was doing like 15 hours a week of physical exercise in preparation for a tournament coming up, and I was not able to get over the soreness which typically should subside after a couple of days normally. So identifying that and pulling that back a little bit is sort of a challenge sometimes. So that is one of my own issues that I have to work on regularly. And so now we're going to move into some of the more specific signs and symptoms of mental health, depression and mood swings. Some of this is going to be overlap. You have a change in routine. This could be you or somebody that you know. Just their typical routine now has changed. Just maybe over time. Could happen over the period of a few weeks, or it could also happen immediately. Lack of interest in normal activities. An existential dread. You know, I work in the clinical setting with a lot of people that like spend hours and hours and hours watching news, and it doesn't seem to be helping them. There's something about that that's making them feel secure because I know everything, but in reality, it's really like not doing a very healthy thing for their brain. Existential dread, social decline from normal. So say my social circle is this big. I have a normal group of, say, 10 people that I normally check in with, and my group is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I'm isolating more. Feeling exhausted, another one that Jenny had mentioned, increased sleeping, that also was there. The feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. Not being able to see a positive future becomes kind of like a lens that I might normally be able to see things, you know, pretty clearly, but then my focus becomes less and less, like I'm seeing less opportunity and less enjoyment of life. And then substance abuse is going to go along with all of these as a rule out initially, because what mental health does, a lot of times people will resort to substances. And if we have somebody, say, that comes into an IOP program, we'll look for the substance abuse first. How much of that is going on? Because we can't really get to underneath what the real problem is until we detox them and clear out what that stuff is on top, if that makes sense.
And IOP stands for intensive outpatient.
Thank you. Yeah. Anxiety and panic is more that what if thinking. You're going, what if this or that or this, and the 1,000 different scenarios of things that can happen, but there are no solutions. So you find yourself 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. What if this now? What if that? What if this, that? But there's no solution involved. So then that now becomes, what am I doing? Like, if I'm not finding solutions in this, then why am I running around that track over and over and over again? Physical symptoms, often I'll check in with my patients that I work with. Well, where do you feel that physically? Okay, so you think about that existential dread that you have, or you think about all that what if thinking that you're having. Do you notice it anywhere head to toe in a physical place? And then we can start finding, maybe if it's in my chest or my neck, or I hold it in my fist, like I really want to clench my fists. We can now work on different physical areas there too, alongside with their treatment. The fears with anxiety and panic, it's always the fears of what could happen. I could lose control. I might be judged negatively. I might die. And so therefore, a lot of times with those fears comes this like overcompensation on the perfectionism side. As long as I can be perfect at doing this, then it'll maybe control my fear, but then of course we all know we can't be perfect, so that burns out too. And then the obsessive compulsive behaviors, and those are two sides of the same coin. The obsessions being the thoughts, the compulsions being the behaviors, like the person who may not feel clean until they wash their hands 50 times. Trauma can be a very specific event that happens. It could be like a near-death vehicle accident. It could be a combat experience. It could be abuse that was incurred in childhood through a period of like years. So we have like kind of a way of categorizing that from a simple kind of trauma, if it's a one-time event, versus traumas that occurred over a period of 5 or 10 years, where it might be really hard to dig down into what those specific traumas were if it was happening daily over such a long period of time. With that, you know, you might notice people dissociate or disconnect. So you'll be talking to them and they're kind of half in, half out of the conversation. You can kind of see them talking about things, but their nonverbals or their body language are giving off something else too. So part of the work clinically that we do with folks is try to get them back into their body so that they can experience those things in a healthy way with tools. So they may also have vivid nightmares. That often occurs. There could be that exhaustion, decreased sleeping, living in a constant fight or flight state. You know, so that's why, hey, what did you do this week? I don't know. Well, what did you do yesterday? I don't know. I was in fight or flight the whole time, so I don't. I'm not tracking what's actually going on. And then substance abuse, again, can go along with that. It can, it might not, but often it does. And thought disorders, that's more of the serious mental illness category where you could have a schizophrenic type thought process like I have cats that are wrestling inside of my stomach and I just can't seem to get them to calm down. And so with that, you may have also audio-visual hallucinations. Typically, it's the audio hallucinations. Paranoia, the pacing, the obsessive-compulsive behaviors can go along with that as well. We put these two diagrams in here to kind of give you an idea. So say you're working with somebody or you have a family member and you think that they may have a problem and you're trying to help them and you want to talk about, you know, maybe getting them into getting some help. And let's say, so we have a stages of change model. Maybe they just drink too much, okay? And let's just use that as our example. So in the stages of change, you're saying they drink too much. Another family member maybe say they are. And then, you know, get more and more people around them that are saying, yeah, we think you have a problem. But the person is saying, I don't have the problem. All of you out here are the ones who are the problem. Well, in the stages of change, you have these 5 basic categories. At the top there is the pre-contemplation. So with the example I just described, that would be someone who cannot really be helped in that mental state. No matter how much you try to point it out to them, explain it to them, they're just not hearing it. So in that place, they would at least have to jump into contemplation to say, maybe with now that 5 people have told me I have a problem, it's possible I have a problem. Now at that point where they say it's possible, you might be able to get in there and start doing some meaningful work with them. But until that point, it's just digging our heels in and butting heads. So it's not a good idea to try to convince someone in pre-contemplation to get help. Does that make sense? Yeah. Along with that comes this mud hole diagram that comes from the Stephen Ministry curriculum, which is a lay ministry program. People go through training. It was put together by a fellow by the name of Kenneth Haug, who integrated Christianity with psychological concepts and provided that for Christian helpers. If you see in the diagram, this person right here, that one, should have a little laser pointer. You got one? You got a laser pointer? There you go. Yeah, that guy. To the left. That one. Perfect. Awesome. Now I don't have to get blind every time I go in front of it. So that's the person with the problem in the diagram. Okay? And so they're in the hole, the mud hole. Now, the person over here on the edge with the sympathy, if you want to get on that guy, the one with sympathy is looking down at that person, basically saying, wow, you have a problem. That sucks to be you. But they're not really doing anything to help. They're just like, I'm glad that's not me. Whoa, okay. Now, you might have the most well-meaning intention to help this person. It's your best friend. It's your family member. Of course you don't want them to suffer. So you decide to over-identify with them and dive into the hole with that person who's already in the hole. Now you have two people in the hole together with the problem. But over here with the empathy person, we have the tree representing that cross of Jesus, and we're holding on to the foot of that cross with our dear life. You know, we're holding on to that foot of that cross, knowing that that's where our strength comes from, and then we're reaching out and saying, do you want help? And then we have to respect that person's decision whether they want the help or not. They may reach out and get the help, they may not, or it might not be the right time. Okay.
Yeah, real quick, just going back to the pre-contemplation. So prior to where I work now, I did do substance use counseling for many years. There are some people that will never leave pre-contemplation. They will die with their addiction and never get to the point where they're ready for help, which is really unfortunate. And it was the hardest part of working in substance use when I had family and friends ask me, what do I do? How do I help this person? And there's no clear answer, because if you do tough love, sometimes that will cause that person to go out and kill themselves. Or if you enable them, support them, that can cause them to be even worse in their addiction. So it's just a very difficult thing. The stages of change, though, do apply to any type of mental health. So whether it's your trauma, you don't recognize it's a problem, eating disorders, all of that. All right, so when to get help? Honestly, anytime. If you're having a difficult time, you notice any changes for you or for a loved one, reach out for help. Pastor can help you out with resources. He has a lot at his disposal. You can always talk to one of us. We're happy to help you with that as well. Whenever stressful events occur, so it can be trauma or not, but it can be something that is difficult to manage, or if you think that something coming up is going to be stressful, because you can learn coping skills and ways to prepare for that stressful event. So whenever your functioning is being negatively impacted. So a lot of times when we are first talking with an individual who comes to counseling, we're looking at how are your symptoms impacting your daily functioning. So is it causing you to call out of work, show up late to work, not do, start to get performance reviews at work that you're not doing well, or if it's school, your grades are declining. For people with depression, it can be so difficult to even get up and take a shower. That can be like a huge monumental task that they have to do. Difficulties in relationships, health issues. At my work, I help a lot of people with chronic health conditions because that can be very debilitating and depressing to have those. So that is a time to reach out for help. Difficulties in relationships. That is one where most couples will reach out when it's too late. They're at that point where they're like, all right, we're going to do counseling or we're going to get a divorce. That is too late. That is at that point, most counselors will tell you they feel like they're doing CPR in a relationship, and most of the time they basically help the couple do a good divorce, basically a healthy divorce. So it's better to do it sooner rather than later. Plus, you can get really great tools on how to communicate with each other, understand each other, move past some of those resentments that are building up in the relationship. And trauma history, as Jason mentioned before, I do have a lot of people that come in and say, I can't have PTSD, I never went to war. That's what a lot of people think PTSD is, but trauma is very subjective to the individual person. So anybody can experience trauma at any different level. Grief is a big one, so when you lose a loved one, it's really helpful to just have a safe place to process those emotions, work through them. And of course, if you or a loved one are in crisis, please call 911. And we have the National Crisis Line, which is 988. So if somebody calls you from another state, that works in that state too. We used to only have local ones, now this is national.
These are some general guidelines to do active listening with people. One, it's normal to be concerned. That's bookended, normal to be concerned. Even in advanced counseling, I mean, You're sometimes hearing a person process their story with you, and you're like, whoa, okay, it's been 20 years in the business and I haven't heard this one. And so you're kind of trying to stay present with them as they're telling that story, as they're going through that trauma history. And this could also just be somebody going through a tough time. You might notice, wow, they're sad, they're depressed, how could I help? So these are just some general guidelines. It's not an all-inclusive treatise. So just doing your best to hear the person's words and nonverbal cues, which can be very challenging because they might be saying certain words and their nonverbals might not be matching up, or they may be. And so you might be picking up on, they're saying they're fine, but their body language is saying that they're freaking out. So like how do we connect those two? How do we get those discrepancies to be matched so we can come to an agreement as we're having this discussion? Do they look angry, sad, confused? Maybe there's something basic that you can provide to them, like water or tissue. Sometimes it's not something that maybe they want, but it's not uncommon in practice where you'll have a patient really break down and start crying, and you'll just ask them, do you need a tissue? That breaks through. That sometimes opens up the doorway to more discussion. Letting them talk without trying to solve anything. You might already have some ideas forming, like, hey, maybe this could help, or maybe that might help. These ideas might already be forming in your mind as they're talking. But as long as they're talking, just let them let it out, let them process. And if you know they're Christian and that they've shared that with you, definitely encourage them that the Lord is here, the Lord loves you, and encourage them that we can even pray right now, Lord, bless this space with your healing power. And that can also just start moving everything, more at light speed, so to speak, clinically speaking, because now you have, where two or more are gathered together, here I'm with you also. And that happens all the time. Again, it's okay to feel anxious or uncertain. And you can even communicate that honestly, like, wow, what you just shared with me, I don't even know what to say about that right now. But thank you. Thank you for sharing that. See if they have a community, family, friends, loved ones, church, who in their life is important, who in their life would care that they're going through this right now. You can remind them that the feelings don't last forever. Sometimes I use the image of a mountain, and I say, right now the mountain's kind of cloudy, but the cloud won't necessarily last forever. That cloud, if you just give it time, you're going to feel better if you can just get through this tough time. Again, back to the physical feeling anywhere. Are you feeling that physically anywhere? A lot of times that gets them back into like, because people can get so out of their body. You can get them back in there and just say, hey, where is that coming up? And a lot of times they'll say, it's somewhere, or they'll just say, no, it's just in my mind, it's just in my thoughts. And if you're looking to dig deeper, just show interest in their details. If someone's sad because of the loss of a girlfriend or boyfriend, you might say, what about that bothers you the most right now? Just be yourself, give them value, and see if they're thankful for anything. What is it that you're thankful for?
And so here's some coping skills that we just want to discuss. Of course, there's a lot of coping skills. These are just a few of the many that are available. The first one, of course, is praying to God, daily devotions, and reading your Bible. We did mention a few Bible passages at the beginning. Another one that, for me, has been a big impact is Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you. Just that reminder, and I do give that to other people, that God has a plan for you. God is in control, and that does bring relief. Distraction and staying busy. So when we have those what-if thoughts, we're feeling restless, anxious, distracting ourselves can be really helpful, along with when those negative thoughts are starting to consume us. Trying to distract yourself can help you get out of that hole a bit. Doing pleasurable activities, so trying to do those things that you enjoy to do. A lot of times when we're depressed or anxious, we have no interest in doing those types of activities, but trying to force ourselves to do those, and also keeping a routine. So continuing to force ourselves to go to work, keeping that daily routine going. Diet and exercise, we have a lot of research knowing just how important physical health and mental health together are. They're impacting each other. We want to address the whole person. So if you're not doing well, making sure you're eating a healthy diet, staying hydrated, exercising, those really do help with your mood. Emotional release coping skills, so those are ways to let out some of those emotions that are building up. So a lot of times with grief, I give these to people because that's a time where we feel a lot of emotions and don't know how to work through those. And so it can be going for a run, going to the batting cages, it can be crying, that can be a healthy emotional release. I used to do grief support groups, and we had for parents, it was called the Thunderdome, and it was a foam room, everything was padded, they had just padded type of kind of things where they could just punch the wall, do whatever they wanted to do, just to feel those emotions and get them out. There's a 5-minute rule to help with motivation. Basically, it tricks your brain. So when you really don't have any interest or motivation in doing something, tell yourself, I'm gonna do this for 5 minutes. I'm gonna do the dishes for 5 minutes. I'm gonna go for a 5-minute walk. I'm gonna call my friend and talk for 5 minutes. What this does is it gets you past that feeling of not wanting to do something, and it does help with that procrastination. Again, it's kind of tricking your brain into doing more. And then redirecting what if to what is. So especially when we have all those what if something bad is going to happen thoughts, a lot of times our what if thoughts are stuff that's never gonna happen, but our brain is just full of all of these what ifs. So trying to remind ourselves, what am I in control of? What can I change in this situation versus focusing on those things outside our control. So especially working in primary care during the pandemic, COVID was a big worry. I had patients that were losing loved ones. They were really scared. You remember the news. Everybody was glued to the news, and it was very scary. And so I always would talk with patients and say, look, we can't change that COVID exists. COVID is here. It's a thing. I can't do anything about it. But what can you do and control in your daily life to help you feel better, help you feel like you can control things? And then, of course, fidget toys. Those are very nice. You see a lot of those that kids use. This is a fidget spinner, so this is a very common one that people like to use. It's just fun to have in your hands and play with. They have rings, they have bracelets, they have these little cubes that you play with. You can go on Amazon, type in fidget toys, and a whole list of them will come up.
Thought challenging, that comes from a cognitive therapist, Albert Ellis. So what Ellis would do was he would challenge his clients like, okay, so what are you so upset about today? And they would come in, well, I got cut off in traffic today and I got really angry about that. And he's like, well, wow, you know, your anger response to that is pretty strong. You know, next time that happens, he would say that you getting cut off in traffic wasn't really what upset you. It's your belief about why you got cut off in traffic that upset you. Your belief was they were out to get me. They were out to get me personally. And so he would say, next time when that happens, pay more attention and watch that car that cut you off and just observe a little bit more and see as that car's going up the road, did they just cut off 3 more people? Then it wasn't a personal attack. And so the anger level goes from here and it comes down to more of a frustration, like, I just have to drive more defensively and be more careful. And that irrational belief that they're personally out to get me changes into more of like a functional belief system that over time can help them to manage that type of a situation better. Mindfulness and meditation and visualization and deep breathing and grounding skills. These are all basic like tool packages that we kind of put together, especially initially for people who have trauma, because we don't really want to get into doing the work of healing any kind of trauma, whether it's simple or complex, unless they've got some sort of a tool packet in place, so that when we're doing that trauma work and they get upset over remembering that abuse that they had or something like that, they've got these grounding tools to help keep them calm. And that can include breathing tools. One breathing tool is a box breathing technique where you can breathe in for 2 seconds. You can hold that for 2 seconds. You can breathe out for 2 seconds. And then you can hold it at the bottom for 2 seconds. And another one that I like is one that came from Herbert Benson, the relaxation response, is he, going along with that 1 Thessalonians 5:17, pray continually. You can literally breathe in and say, Lord Jesus, on the in-breath, and on the out-breath, have mercy. And then in-breath, Lord Jesus, have mercy. And then it can kind of become just like a nice breathing tool with an incorporated scripture into there.
And just remember with the breathing, you want to make sure you do belly breaths. So a lot of times when we're anxious or in a panic attack, we breathe with our chest. You want to make sure it's that belly breath because it really does help bring down those stress levels in the brain.
A good test for that too is if you breathe in, breathing out longer than you breathe in. If you're not used to doing that, it's a challenge. You know, you can breathe in easily 3, 4, 5 seconds. Breathing out, like maybe you get 2 seconds. And with practice, you can work on getting that out breath to be equal to the in breath. Okay. So more increasing the social network. Okay. That's a big deal. And so one of the things that we had talked about before is a big deal with mental illness is you have a smaller and smaller social support group. One of the things I speculate about with these school shooters that you hear about, this pops up another one every month. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another. And I think about these folks. You know, one of the things that I think they all have in common is that they don't have a social support network. So we want to really, whenever we're working with people, whether it's ourselves or somebody else, we want to make sure we keep that social support network strong. It doesn't have to be huge. It just has to be quality.
The handouts that you have that Pastor gave to you, there also are extras on the music stand. Just have some of the resource or the coping skills we went over and additional ones.
And so the exercise demonstration, yeah, if you wanted to try that box breathing thing, you just breathe in for a second or two, whatever you're comfortable with. You hold it for a couple of seconds, and then you breathe it out for a couple of seconds, and then you hold it for a couple of seconds, and then you just repeat it. Does that make sense?
And it helps too to kind of trace with your eyes a box. So if you're at work and you're right in front of your computer, that's a square. Square is a primary shape, so it's in every room that you walk in. So that's why the box breathing is there, because you can just find a square anywhere.
And then another one quick is when you're having a lot of like maybe that what if thinking and all this and this, and you're not noticing that there are any solutions that are coming to you, a lot of times you can just maybe visualize a stop sign. If you're a visual person and you can visualize that. You know, you're saying stop, hey, I'm having those thoughts again and they're not healthy and they're not helpful, and I know these thoughts always lead me in a negative direction. So instead I choose to use one of these distractions or something that I know is going to be healthier for me to focus on instead of just this mad, chaotic type thinking, you know. Okay, so with self-harm and suicide signs, they may include, they may not include the person feeling helpless and hopeless, again, not seeing a future, just their visual field is getting smaller. You might see visual evidence of cuts or burns. You might learn that they've had previous attempts at self-harm or suicide. You might learn they have a plan to harm themselves. You might learn that they also have means to do it. So they might have access to narcotics or firearms. You might notice that they're engaging in extreme or promiscuous behaviors beyond what their normal is. You might find out that they're isolating a lot. You might notice that they're having dramatic mood shifts. And you also might notice that all of a sudden they get happier. So my friend I told you about earlier when we started the presentation, one thing they noted about him was his dad told me later that when they went on a family trip, he had been the happiest that he'd been ever since he could remember. And he found out later, because of how suicide works, is once a person has made up their mind, there's almost a peace there. Because they know that the suffering is only going to last for whatever, another week, another 2 weeks, until I know for a fact I'm going to carry out my plan. So that's another mood shift that you would be aware of in that case. And then also the withdrawal from friends and family.
So we wanted to put together some emergency and hotline resources, because not everybody is aware that these exist. If you want to just throw them on there so we can get through them. Banner Behavioral Health does have inpatient hospitalization, so if somebody has a plan to hurt themselves, that is a great place to have them go where it's safe and they can work through that. And then they also do intensive outpatient groups for mental health. So we do have different levels of care that we will assess patients for and refer. And intensive outpatient is a higher level of care. So basically, once a week counseling just isn't going to cut it. They need something more. We also have a postpartum support hotline, child abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence. Just these are really helpful with all the people we interact with.
Some of the treatment options for people who need help, you have trained counseling professionals. Jenny and myself both are of those top 4 tier, the licensed clinical social worker, the licensed professional counselor, licensed marriage and family therapists, licensed substance abuse counselors. That shows you that that person has gone through a rigorous master's program, which included hundreds of clinical hours in their master's program, and then thousands of supervised hours going from their associate counselor license to their independent license, which all those are. And so that shows you just a little general guideline of what all those specialties are. In the case of maybe needing to go in the direction of a prescription medication to help balance the chemistry in the brain, you have medical doctors. PCPs will prescribe a lot of times. You don't necessarily have to go to a psychiatrist to get like an SSRI medication that balances anxiety and depression and tries to bring those highs and lows more into a baseline level. You have peer support groups, which are typically run by someone who's been in recovery for a long time. So you have an AA group where you have somebody who may have been in full recovery for 5, 10, 15 or more years. And then they are assigned usually a coach, a mentor to help the new ones that are in recovery. Smart recovery is sort of based on the 12-step model, which those AA groups are. Trained church volunteers, the WELS resources. Did you want to go through those, Josh? Yeah, it's at the end. Okay. We have Stephen Ministry. We have Peace with God online ministry, and we have church volunteers with Bible-based listening skills. Equine therapy, that's just, spending time with horses, going on retreats. A lot of times those intensive inpatient treatment programs might include, you're going to be here for 60 or 90 days. And in this 60 to 90 day period, we're going to detox you. We're going to do a lot of group work. We're going to do a lot of individual work. We're going to do a lot of, field work. All that stuff goes into that. Michael Phelps, the swimmer, he did the Meadows out, I think, in Wickenburg. I think he was out there for a pretty good stint as he was recovering from his substance abuse issues.
So our synod has resources as well, more Christ-centered. Christian Therapist Network, there's the website. It's also on your handout. WELS Marriage, through congregational services, they have all sorts of different workshops and stuff that you can do, like Jenny talked about, to make sure that the conversation and things are strong in your marriage before they get worse. So it's really just meant to strengthen your marriage. Christian Family Solutions, we have a counselor here in the East Valley. They can either be done face-to-face or they can be done on Zoom. And then, of course, MAP counseling through WLC Family Services is something that we offer here at church. So if you felt like you wanted to get a therapist, you would meet with pastor, get the access code, and then it's free of charge. Our church pays for it. It's part of our budget. So these are resources that you can either use yourself or you can encourage somebody else to use as well.
All right, and then we want to make sure we have time for questions, so we're going to fly through the rest of the resources. They're all on those packets that we gave you. So one that I wanted to point out, we did put some support groups. Most support groups are free. There is a specific one for survivors of suicide. So if you have lost somebody who completed suicide, those are for those people. So any questions or comments? It's a late night.
I think of all the stuff that I have observed, and I'm always watching documentaries and stuff, and I studied psychology and sociology in high school. But I think from what I've seen, I think everyone has issues.
Mm-hmm. No one's perfect.
Some of us
Yep.
know and some of us don't.
I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
if everybody would understand that,
Mhm.
especially those who are really struggling, then they wouldn't feel so bad about their predicament because they would know that this is something that everybody, so you feel you have something in common, then you don't feel so isolated yourself, like, I'm dealing with this and everyone around me is fine. Well, they're not.
Yeah.
Everybody has situations. I'm having problems. My brother's having problems, big time right now. Actually has for quite a while. We went through with our youngest son for, it's probably been almost a decade now. And then, you have your coworkers and, they have issues with their children acting up or whatnot, or their husband left them, or they lost their house.
Mm-hmm.
And, the bottom line is everybody can identify with things that they've seen up there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Yep,
you.
absolutely.
And that's an important thing to remember because sometimes we tend to put a stigma on mental health.
Yeah.
As if it's this really bad thing and that person's got mental health problems and oh, how terrible they are. And we all deal with it in different ways. Some people just need more help at certain times in dealing with that. But we're all dealing with a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And some people are able to, deal with it in the proper way, but there are times when we don't or others don't, and that's when they need the help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a question on that equine therapy. What is equine therapy?
It's spending time with horses.
Horses, yep.
Okay.
So there's therapists and
Well,
horses that are trained with
I
that.
was just thinking now, if I'm starting to have problems, could I ride my staff minister around and would that be therapeutic?
You would have to go through a certification process. Yeah.
But yeah, they have some really great camps and that do the equine therapy that can be really helpful. But animals too are great, so pets can be very helpful too when it comes to just dealing with things.
By the way, I noticed that with members who lose a spouse, in their old age and they get a pet, and they're talking to the pet and everything else, and it's actually very therapeutic for them to have that animal in the house.
And it forces them to go outside, and take it
And
for a
take
little bit of a
care-
walk or take
and
care of
take
it.
care
And
the
yep,
animal, too.
it does.
I recently had a friend, he's in his 80s, and he lost his wife probably 2 or more years ago now, and he's got a pet, and he also went through a program called Grief Share. I'm not sure if we have that in our resources, but that's also a free program sponsored by many churches. And if you went into, Grief Share, if you Googled that, you would be able to find meetings for that too. Anybody who's dealing with loss or grief.
Do you see in those type of support groups, like people just joining with the loved one that has lost someone as like an extra support for the meeting? Like
Sometimes.
going with them, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah.
They can, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some specific support groups that won't allow that, but most are okay with that. Same thing with 12-step groups, recovery groups. A lot of times that is helpful. There's also Al-Anon available, so if you have someone that is in an addiction, a family member, a loved one, that's a space for you to talk and vent and have that time to kind of have that conversation with other people that are going through similar things.
You talked about those circles, that stages, and that one, was it
Pre-contemplation.
Pre-contemplation.
Yeah.
pre-contemplation, where a person says, I don't have any problems. What if the person acknowledges they have a problem, but I don't need the help, I can do everything on my own?
So that's more contemplation. So they're kind of at that point where, okay, I can see this is a problem, but they're not quite in the next stage of preparation where I'm making plans to do something about it. But that's a good spot, as Jason pointed out, where we can continue to talk with them and help them, kind of offer resources. Even if they don't use them in that moment, they have those resources available when that moment comes where now they're ready for it.
They might even say, well, I'm used to drinking 12 beers a day, but I'm in contemplation now, and now I'm drinking 6 a day. So they're actually reducing their level of use, and so we would say that they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right, but if they say, I know I have a problem, but
Yeah.
I don't need any outside help. No, I really don't need it, that's not for me, I can do it myself. How do you get to
Then we'd probably start talking about, let's talk about that plan that you have for yourself that might work.
What does it look like?
Let's see what that is. Yeah, sure.
I have a lot of people that will be newly sober and they say, I got this. I don't need counseling, I don't need medications, I'm great, I'm sober, this is it, I've got this. And almost always they come back and they've relapsed, and it's just because life throws you curveballs, and if you don't have the coping skills, positive coping skills, you're gonna resort to your negative coping skill, which is drinking or drugs or whatever else. And so it's one of those where we just have to work with them where they're at, and that's a big thing in counseling, is you meet them where they're at when they come in the door. You can't do anything more than that.
Had one who had a drinking problem with beer and that, and able to work with them February through like August, and then all of a sudden they're off the wagon again.
Football.
All those beer commercials, and say,
Yeah.
don't watch
That's
any
right.
football.
Alcohol is one of the hardest ones. It's so difficult. And then even, I think Fry's Marketplace has it now where you can go and have wine while you go shopping. And then the movie theaters now have it where you can have beer or wine while you watch a movie. So our society promotes it as this completely normal thing. And, so that's what's so hard. It's so easily accessible for people.
So it's like a social thing.
Norm.
You-
Yeah.
Like all the shows.
Yeah, you always see somebody on TV and they come home from a hard days of work and they grab that wine right away. And that's fine in moderation, but when it turns into, I drank a whole bottle of wine, now it's reaching the point where this is not good. This is getting to be too much.
Yeah, you get the huge billboard as you're driving down the freeway, and it
Yeah.
says, have a Bud Light right now. And then you're looking, there's a little fine type underneath that says, drink responsibly.
Or if you have a drinking problem, call, and it's so teeny tiny you can't even see it. Yeah.
Or you're in the casino.
Yeah, the gambling.
You're gambling. You're like, there's a sign over there. It says, do you think you have a gambling problem? Call this number.
Yeah. But at least they're doing something, right? Hey, we'll take it.
They're covering
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
But another question, but you did say there are some who will never, in that pre-contemplation,
Yeah,
they
sure.
can't be helped.
They won't ever get to. And there's a lot of that, you hear that saying rock bottom, which I don't necessarily like because there's farther to go than rock bottom, but they won't ever hit what we see as rock bottom. They won't ever get to that point where they realize they have that problem, which is really sad. And like I said, I had family and friends just saying, what can we do? How do we help this person? How do we get them help? When it comes to mental health, there are steps for us to be able to petition someone, basically get them court ordered to do treatment, but substance use does not have anything in place where we can try and protect somebody with that. So if somebody says, I'm gonna kill myself, and they don't wanna go and get help, we can write a petition where it goes before a judge, and if a judge deems that they meet criteria, they will be picked up by police, taken to the hospital, and hospitalized. Same thing if somebody says they're gonna kill somebody else. We have steps in place for that. But when it comes to substance use, there isn't anything. So that person's basically killing themselves, and we're watching them do it, and it's a helpless feeling.
We can do a lot for people, but we can't do everything for people, you know, and we can't stop them from picking up.
If they don't want counseling, then finally, you can't force them
Yeah.
to go through it.
Yeah. And we can't stop them from picking up that drink again and drinking, you know, and a lot of times, family members especially, they'll just say, well, it's my fault that they're drinking so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then the family will enable that, you know. Somehow it's my fault. Well, did you pick up that drink and put it in their mouth? Like, no, it's not your fault.
And the fentanyl crisis has been very scary too, because we've had even kids that are overdosing because they're using marijuana and it was laced with fentanyl. And so that's also a scary thing that we're seeing a lot of. So that's just something to kind of, you know, if you have anybody that you know that is, you know, experimenting or messing around with drugs, just please kind of have that conversation of, hey, look, there's stuff in that. Be careful of what you do. And Narcan you can pick up for free with no questions asked at any pharmacy. So you can have it on hand for a loved one, or you can give to somebody. And that helps with reverse overdose of opioids.
They even have synthetic drugs that people can use. When I was working in an environment with a lot of co-occurring disorders, you know, that's someone who has like maybe a serious mental illness, but alongside of that a substance use disorder. The synthetic drugs that were out there at the time were main ones were spice and bath salts, and they were cheap to get, but it would give you this, you know, rush, this euphoric feeling. So they would just fry their brains out on that stuff.
Bath salts are scary too, because they keep changing what they put in it. And I've had patients where there is no way to reverse the damage that's done to the brain. So that's a very scary one. But yeah, I mean, there's so many out there. And marijuana, long-term daily use of that does cause a lot of health issues, just like alcohol. Any other questions or comments?
So
Yeah.
as a church family,
Mhm.
how can we support our members in healthy mental health? What can we do specifically here? And then how do we become a part of our community that is struggling with these problems also? What can we offer here at church?
Yeah, so I think just having conversations with people, having those connections, and then if you do see somebody struggling, making sure you check in on them, making that phone call or sending that text to them just to let them know that you care. They may not be ready to get help in that moment, but at least they know that you're kind of that lifeline, that person that they can turn to if they are struggling with that. But again, the resources, encouraging devotions and Bible passages. Again, pastors are a really great resource too for people. Just kind of opening up that network of here's all these options and supports that are available to you. In regards to our community with your coworkers and loved ones, just taking the time to check in on them. It is really rough out there with the inflation prices, housing prices. We have so many homeless people now that they had good jobs, but they just can't afford rent anymore. It's just ridiculous. Just taking the time to check in on them and offer support. A lot of times we're so focused on our stuff and kind of in our little world that we don't remember, hey, just asking a question, just checking in on somebody can make a huge difference.
And just don't underestimate, Loretta, the power of just being a genuine Christian to someone who might you run across somebody just, you know, at the store or something, and you just have a nice little conversation with them. Well, that person might have just been having this idea in their mind that day, like nobody cares, and now they have evidence that is contrary to that right now. It might be that little piece, but it's like, I can't say nobody cares because I just had a conversation with a person today that genuinely gave me like 2 minutes of their time. So, you know, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
If I may, there are certain personality types that if you interrupt in their business, they're going to tell you to go buzz out because they just want to be left alone.
Sure,
And it makes the problem worse.
sure.
Yeah.
I know, I'm one of those types. If I
Yeah.
want help, I'll ask for it.
Sure.
And that's okay, and that's
Right.
just where being a Christian is somebody, right? So just being nice and being a friend and all of that, but if somebody's not ready for that change, that's that pre-contemplation stage of change we were talking about. They don't want to talk about it, they don't feel comfortable talking about it, or they don't feel that they have a problem.
All right, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much
Thanks
for coming.
everyone. Yeah.
And on the back, there is a sign-up sheet if you want to just put your email address there if you do want the PowerPoint and resources sent to you over email. Our email information is there too, so if you want to reach out to either of us individually, or of course you can talk with Pastor if you have any personal questions that you want to discuss.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Dinner time.